The transport ship docked at Station Veritas 7, just as the station's artificial sun began its morning cycle. Una Park stood near the window, watching the massive structure grow larger. She had spent 3 weeks in space to reach this place. The Galactic Military Academy was famous across 47 different species. It was old. It was brutal. And it had never trained a human before. She was one of the first 3. The other 2 humans on the transport were Jiho Kang and Woonji Lim. Jiho was tall and quiet. He had served in the Korean Army for 6 years before volunteering for this program. Yoonji was smaller, sharper, with eyes that never stopped moving. She had been a pilot before this. They had all been chosen because someone on Earth believed humans needed to prove something to the galaxy. Una was not sure what she was supposed to prove. She only knew that she had nothing left on Earth worth staying for. The station's docking bay was enormous. Hundreds of aliens moved through the space, each one stranger than the last. There were tall reptilian creatures with scales that shifted color. There were floating orbs of light that hummed when they communicated. There were insectoid beings with too many limbs and crystalline entities that looked like walking glass. Una had studied the species files during the journey, but seeing them in person was different. None of them looked at the humans with respect. Some looked with curiosity. Most looked with something close to pity. A voice boomed across the bay. New recruits. Form lines by species designation. The voice belonged to Instructor Crow. He was a reptilian, nearly 3 meters tall, with dark green scales and yellow eyes that seemed to glow. His body was covered in old scars. His teeth were visible, even when his mouth was closed. He had fought in something called the Border Wars, a conflict that had lasted 200 years and killed billions. He was considered one of the finest warriors the Academy had ever produced. He was also known for breaking recruits. Not physically. Mentally. Yuna fell into line with Jiho and Yoonji. They were the only humans, so their line was very short. Crow walked past each species group, inspecting them. He spent a long time with the larger species. He barely glanced at the smaller ones. When he reached the humans, he stopped. He stared down at Una. She was the smallest of the 3. She weighed perhaps 60 kilograms. Her hair was black and cut short. Her face showed nothing. Humans, Krell said. The word sounded like an insult. Your species achieved interstellar travel 40 years ago. Before that, you were still killing each other over resources on a single planet. You have no natural weapons. No armor, no venom. Your senses are weak. Your bodies are fragile. He leaned closer to Una. His breath smelled like copper. Why are you here? Una met his eyes. To learn, Instructor. Krell made a sound that might have been a laugh. To learn, yes. We will see how quickly you learn. He moved on. The orientation lasted 6 hours. The Academy's rules were simple. Obey your instructors. Complete your training. Do not die. Medical care was available, but limited. The Academy believed that pain was a teacher. Weakness was not tolerated. Fear was expected but had to be controlled. Una listened carefully. She had experienced pain before. She understood that the galaxy was not kind. That night, in the small room she shared with Yoonji, she unpacked her few belongings. A photograph of her family. A small book of poetry her mother had loved. A ring that had belonged to her father. Everything else she owned fit into a single bag. Yoonji watched her from the other bed. Krell was testing you today. The way he got in your face. He wanted to see if you would flinch. I know, Una said. You didn't. No. Yoonji was quiet for a moment. He's gonna come after you harder because of that. The instructors here, they need to see fear. It's how they measure progress. If you don't show it, they think something is wrong with you. Una placed the photograph on her small shelf. In it Her parents stood with her and her younger brother Doyem. They were smiling. It had been taken 15 years ago, before the accident that killed her parents. Before everything changed. "Something is wrong with me," Yuna said simply. But not in the way he thinks. The first week of training was physical. Running, climbing, fighting. The academy's gravity could be adjusted, and they trained at various levels. Standard gravity for most species was about 1.2 times Earth normal. The humans struggled at first, but adapted quickly. Their bodies were surprisingly good at adapting. Millions of years of evolution on a harsh planet had given them that gift. Yuna was not the fastest or the strongest. But she did not quit. When she fell, she got up. When she was knocked down in combat training, she stood again. And again. And again. The other species began to notice. The small one does not stay down. A crystalline cadet named Vess observed to his companion. "I have struck her 7 times. She keeps rising." "Humans are prey animals," his companion replied. "They do not know when they are beaten." Yuna heard them. She said nothing. She simply waited for the next round. Krell watched from the observation deck. He had been watching the human female since her arrival. Her heart rate data was displayed on his screen. During orientation, when he had confronted her, it had barely increased. During combat training, it rose appropriately but never spiked with panic. She processed pain like information, not like trauma. He had seen this pattern before, once, in a soldier who had been tortured for 3 years and had stopped feeling anything at all. But this human had not been tortured. She was young. She had come from a peaceful nation on a peaceful part of Earth. There was no reason for her to be like this, unless humans were simply built differently. Doc Krell pulled up her file. Family deceased. 1 surviving brother. Multiple incidents of trauma survived. Psychological evaluation. Stable. Unusually stable. He made a note in the system. The human female would be scheduled for the fear chamber early. He needed to understand what she was. And the only way to understand a creature was to find what it feared. Every creature feared something. He would find hers. The fear chamber sat at the center of the academy like a heart made of metal and nightmares. It was a perfect sphere, 30 meters across, lined with neural interface nodes that could read any mind and create any reality. For 300 years, it had broken the proudest warriors in the galaxy. It found what they feared most and made them livid until they screamed. Yuna stood outside its door on day 15 of her training. The door was black and featureless. A single red light glowed above it. Other cadets passed by, and most of them looked away. Everyone knew what the chamber was. Everyone feared it. "You do not have to go in," Jiho said. He had come to stand with her. His face was worried. "You can request a delay. Some cadets wait months before they are ready." "Krell scheduled me early for a reason," Yuna said. "If I delay, he will schedule me again tomorrow. And the day after. He wants to see something from me. He wants to see you break." "Yes." Jiho was quiet for a moment. "Onji and I talked last night. About you. We are worried." Yuna looked at him. "Why?" "Because you do not seem worried. About anything. Ever." He hesitated. "I lost my father when I was young. It took me years to learn how to feel normal again. You lost both parents. You almost lost your brother. But you act like none of it touches you." Yuna considered this. She liked Jiho. He was honest. "It touches me," she said finally. "I just learned that feeling. It does not help. The pain stays whether I cry or not. So I stopped crying. It is more efficient." Before Jiho could respond, the door to the fear chamber opened. Instructor Krell stood inside, his yellow eyes bright with anticipation. Behind him, through a window, Una could see the observation room. It was full. At least 15 instructors had come to watch the human enter the chamber. "Cadet Park," Krell said. "You honor us with your presence. Please, step inside." Una walked past him without hesitation. The chamber's interior was dark, lit only by the faint glow of the neural nodes. In the center was a single chair with straps for arms and legs. Cables hung from above like dead vines. "Sit," Krell commanded. She sat. The straps closed automatically around her wrists and ankles. They were cold. "The procedure is simple," Krell explained, circling her like a predator. "The chamber will interface with your neural pathways. It will find your deepest fears. Then it will show them to you, again and again, until you confront them or until you break." He leaned close. "Most break. I understand," Una said. "Do you? I have seen Vorthan commanders weep in this chair. I have seen crystalline elders shatter themselves rather than continue. Every species has something that terrifies them at their core. Something primal. Something they cannot escape." He touched a control panel. "Let us find yours." The neural link activated. Una felt it enter her mind like cold water pouring into her skull. It was uncomfortable, but not painful. She had experienced worse. The chamber began to search Dot in the observation room. The instructors watched the data streams with fascination. The human's neural patterns were surprisingly complex. Her brain was smaller than most species, but it was dense with connections. The chamber's AI had to work harder than usual to map her fear responses. Then it found something. The simulation began. Una was no longer in the chamber. She was 12 years old, standing beside a river. The water was moving fast, brown with mud from recent rain. And in the water, her younger brother Do-hyun was drowning. She could hear him screaming, could see his small hands reaching for her. The current was pulling him under. No one else was around. Just her. Just him. In the observation room. The instructors leaned forward. This was the moment. The moment of primal terror. The moment when the subject realized they were helpless, that death was taking someone they loved, that there was nothing they could do. Una dove into the water. The data streams flickered. The chamber's eye registered confusion. The subject was not experiencing paralysis, was not experiencing overwhelming fear. Instead, her stress hormones had activated a different response. Her muscles were flooding with oxygen. Her focus was narrowing to a single point. She was problem-solving done in the simulation. Una fought the current. She grabbed Do-hyun's hand and pulled. She kicked toward the shore, even as the water tried to drag them both down. She got him to the bank. He was not breathing. She began chest compressions, counting in her head, breathing into his lungs, refusing to stop even as minutes passed. 11 minutes later, help arrived. Do-hyun coughed up water and started crying. The simulation reset. Now Una was 16. She was in a car. The car was upside down. Glass was everywhere. Her parents were in the front seats. They were not moving. Would never move again. Her leg was broken, the bone visible through torn skin. The chamber expected despair. Expected grief so overwhelming that the subject would collapse. Una crawled out of the car. She stood on her broken leg. She walked 3 kilometers to the main road, flagged down a truck, and directed the driver to call for help. She did not cry. Not then. Not later at the hospital. Not at the funeral. She had learned something that day. Crying did not fix anything. Only action did. The simulation reset again. Mars Colony 7. A hull breach. Una was 23, newly deployed, watching atmosphere rush out through a crack in the wall. Her commanding officer was unconscious. 2 other soldiers were dead. She was the only one left. She pressed her hands against the seal. The cold of space reached through the thin metal and began to take her fingers. 2 of them went numb, then dead. She held the seal for 4 hours until a repair team arrived. She lost the fingers. She saved the colony. The chamber tried again. And again. It showed her the river, the car, the whole breach. It combined them. It amplified them. It created new scenarios where everyone she loved died and she was forced to watch. Yuna's heart rate climbed to 150 beats per minute. Then it stabilized. In every scenario, she did the same thing. She assessed the situation. She found a solution. She acted. Sometimes she failed. Sometimes people died. But she never stopped trying. Never surrendered to the fear. 6 hours passed. In the observation room, Instructor Krell stared at the data in disbelief. The chamber's état I had flagged an error that had never appeared before. Subject not responding to fear. Stimulus, psychological. Paradox detected. Fear response present but immediately converted to action response. Unable to induce paralysis OR. Breakdown. Recommend termination of session. Krell terminated the session manually. The neural link disconnected. The straps released. Yuna sat in the chair for a moment, breathing slowly. Her face was wet with sweat. Her hands were shaking slightly. She had felt every moment of those simulations, had relived every loss, every failure, every moment of pain, but she had not broken. The chamber door opened. She stood and walked out on steady legs. Krell was waiting, his expression unreadable. Behind him, the observation room had gone silent. 15 instructors from a dozen species were staring at her like she was something they had never seen before. She looked directly at Krell. "Is there a harder version?" she asked. Krell did not answer. He could not answer. In 300 years, no one had ever asked that question. Yuna nodded once, as if his silence was expected, and walked away. Behind her, the instructors began speaking in hushed, urgent voices. The human had not broken. Something was very wrong. Or very right. They could not tell which. Instructor Krell had not slept properly in 2 weeks. Every night, he reviewed the footage from the fear chamber. Every night, he watched the same impossible thing happen. A human, a small fragile creature from a death trap planet, had walked through 6 hours of psychological torture and asked for more. It was not possible. And yet it had happened. He began to design new tests. The academy gave instructors significant freedom in how they trained their cadets. Krell intended to use every bit of that freedom. He would find the breaking point of Yuna Park, or he would destroy, himself trying. The first test was gravity torture. The training room could simulate up to 10 times Earth's standard gravity. Most species could handle 2 or 3 times normal for short periods. Extended exposure was used as punishment or as extreme training. Krell set the room to 4 times Earth gravity and locked Yuna inside for 72 hours. At 4G, every movement became agony. Standing was like carrying 3 copies of yourself on your back. Breathing required conscious effort. Blood pooled in the lower body. The heart worked overtime just to keep oxygen flowing to the brain. Most species would beg for release within the first 12 hours. Yuna did not beg. For the first day, she moved carefully, conserving energy. She did push-ups and stretches to keep her blood flowing. She ate the nutrition packs provided and drank water slowly. Her body screamed at her, but she had learned long ago that bodies always screamed. The key was not to listen. On the second day, she slept. Not well, but enough. She had trained herself to sleep in difficult conditions during her Mars deployment. A whole breach at any moment meant you learned to rest when you could. On the third day, she began to exercise again, slowly, methodically. When Krell finally opened the door at hour 72, She walked out under her own power. Her legs trembled. Her face was pale. But she walked. "Report to medical," Krell ordered. "I am fine, Instructor." That was not a request. She went to medical. The doctors found minor muscle damage and elevated stress hormones, but nothing permanent. The human body, they noted in their report, seemed designed to endure punishment. It healed quickly and adapted to stress in ways that other species did not. Krell read the report and felt something he had not felt in decades: frustration. The second test was sensory deprivation. He placed Yuna in a chamber with no light, no sound, and no way to mark the passage of time. Most species began to hallucinate within 48 hours. Their minds, desperate for input, would create monsters from nothing. The chamber was considered one of the cruelest training methods available. Yuna was kept inside for 5 days. When the door finally opened, she blinked against the sudden light, but did not stumble. Krell was waiting with a team of psychologists, ready to document her breakdown. "How do you feel?" one of the psychologists asked. Yuna considered the question. "I had time to think," she said. "I composed a piece of music in my head. 3 movements. I would like to write it down if you have paper." The psychologists looked at each other. They had no idea how to respond. Later, Krell reviewed the neural monitoring data from the chamber. Her brain activity had remained stable throughout. She had experienced some stress in the first day, but had then entered a calm, meditative state. She had essentially taught herself to meditate perfectly under conditions designed to drive beings insane. The third test was combat. Krell arranged for Yuna to face opponents from predator species. These were beings designed by evolution to hunt and kill. They had claws, fangs, enhanced reflexes, armored hides. Yuna had none of these things. She was small, soft, and slow by galactic standards. She lost the first 7 fights, badly. Each time, she was knocked down within seconds. Each time, she hit the mat hard enough to leave bruises. The medical staff began to complain about the frequency of her visits, but each time, she learned something. By the 8th fight, she had studied her opponent's movements. She knew that the Velthan fighter always led with his right claw. She knew that his armored hide had a gap at the joints. She knew that his reflexes were fast, but that his ability to change direction was limited. When the fight began, she did something no one expected. Instead of retreating, she moved forward, directly into his attack. At the last moment, she twisted, dislocated her own shoulder to escape his grip, and struck the gap in his joint armor with her elbow. The Velthan screamed and dropped. Yuna stood over him, her left arm hanging uselessly, her face twisted in pain. But she was standing, and he was not. The training hall went silent. Afterward, Jiho and Yoonji found her in the medical bay. Her shoulder had been reset, and she was waiting for the pain medication to take effect. She looked tired, more tired than they had ever seen her. "You have to stop this," Jiho said. "Krell is trying to kill you." "He's trying to understand me," Yuna corrected. "There is a difference, is there?" Yoonji asked. "You have been tested more than any other cadet. He's obsessed with you." The other humans are starting to get nervous. They think Krell will come for us next. Yuna was quiet for a moment. "He will not come for you. He is not interested in humans. He's interested in me, in what I represent. And what is that?" Yuna looked at her hands. The 2 fingers she had lost on Mars had been replaced with prosthetics. They worked perfectly, better than the originals, really. But she still felt the ghost of the missing ones sometimes. "I'm not sure yet," she said, "but I think he's afraid. Not of me. Of what it means if I do not break. If humans truly cannot be broken the way other species can." She flexed her prosthetic fingers. It challenges everything he believes about training, about fear, about war. Jiho shook his head. You speak like you understand him. I do. He is a warrior. He was trained to believe that fear is the greatest weapon, that whoever controls fear controls the battle. But what happens when you meet an enemy who does not feel fear the way you expect? Yuna smiled, though there was no humor in it. You panic. And then you make mistakes. The next day, Krell requested a meeting with the Academy's commandant. He presented his findings. The human female was abnormal, possibly dangerous. Her psychological profile did not match any known species. She processed fear like information, not like emotion. She could not be broken through conventional means. The commandant, an ancient being of pure energy, listened carefully. What do you recommend? The commandant asked. Krell hesitated. This was the question he had been dreading, because the honest answer was that he did not know. In 200 years of training recruits, he had never met one he could not break. Until now. I recommend a final test, he said finally. One designed specifically for her. If she passes, she will graduate with highest honors. If she fails, we will finally understand her limits. And if she passes? The commandant pressed. What then? Krell was silent for a long time. Then we must accept that humans are not like other species, he said. And we must decide what that means for the galaxy. The commandant approved the test. Yuna was not informed. She would not know what was coming until she was already inside it. That was the point. The simulation began without warning. One moment, Yuna was sleeping in her quarters. The next, she was standing on the bridge of a damaged starship. Alarms screamed. Red lights flashed. The smell of burning metal filled the air. This was the fear chamber again, but deeper. More real. She could feel the deck plates vibrating under her feet. Could taste blood in her mouth from where she had bitten her tongue. Could taste blood in her tongue. Voice came over the ship's communication system. Cold. Alien. Human vessel. You have trespassed in sovereign territory. You have 60 seconds to surrender. Failure to comply will result in your destruction. Yuna looked around the bridge. Control panels were smashed. 2 crew members lay dead against the far wall. And slumped in the captain's chair was a figure she recognized immediately. Mhon, her brother. He was bleeding from a wound in his chest. His eyes were closed. His breathing was shallow. She was at his side in seconds. The wound was deep, probably from shrapnel. He needed surgery. Needed blood. Needed a medical bay that was not destroyed. She had maybe 4 minutes before he bled out. 45 seconds, the enemy voice announced. Yuna's mind was already racing. She checked the ship's status on the one working display. Life support was failing. 8 minutes of oxygen remaining. Weapons were offline. Engines were damaged, but functional. The enemy vessel was holding position 300 meters off the starboard bow. She had no weapons. No time, a dying brother. And an enemy demanding surrender. In the observation room, 17 instructors watched the simulation unfold. This was Krell's masterpiece. He had designed it personally. The scenario was unwinnable. Every option led to failure. Surrender meant capture and execution. Fighting meant death. Running meant dying in the void. And no matter what choice the subject made, someone they loved would die. The only acceptable response was to break. To collapse. To finally show the fear that every living thing carried in its core. She is assessing the damage, one instructor noted. Her stress hormones are elevated but controlled. Her heart rate is climbing, another added. 140 beats per minute. 150. Stabilizing at 155. Krell leaned forward. This was the moment. The moment when the weight of an impossible situation would crush her. When she would finally scream, or cry, or beg. On the simulated bridge, Yuna made her first decision. She ripped a piece of her uniform and pressed it against Do-hyu's wound. It was not enough to save him, but it would slow the bleeding. Buy her maybe 2 more minutes. 30 seconds, the enemy announced. Yuna moved to the communication panel. It was damaged but still functional. She opened a channel to the enemy vessel. "This is Cadet Yuna Park of the human vessel," she said. Her voice was calm, almost conversational. "I am prepared to discuss surrender terms." In the observation room, several instructors nodded. This was expected. Surrender was the only logical choice. The human was finally accepting reality, but Yuna was not finished. While she spoke, her hands moved across the remaining controls. She was rerouting life support, pulling oxygen from non-essential sections. Storage bays, empty crew quarters, dead compartments. It would not save the ship, but it would buy her 11 more minutes of air. "State your terms," the enemy responded. "I require medical assistance from my crew member. He is critically wounded. If you provide medical care, I will surrender myself and this vessel without resistance." The enemy was silent for a moment. Then, "Unacceptable. Surrender unconditionally or be destroyed. You have 15 seconds." Yuna closed the communication channel. She had learned what she needed. The enemy wanted to capture the ship, not destroy it. They were negotiating. That meant they had weaknesses. Everyone who negotiated had weaknesses. She turned to the one working console and accessed the ship's database. The enemy vessel specifications were on file. Old, but useful. She found what she was looking for. Their communication frequency used a specific encryption pattern. And that pattern had a flaw. With 6 seconds left, she broadcast a message. Not to the enemy vessel. To the void itself. To anyone listening. "This is Cadet Yuna Park. My vessel is damaged at coordinates 7742. My brother, Do-hyun Park, is aboard. Our family resides at 124 Maple Street, Bizen, Earth. If he dies today, the following coordinates will be broadcast to every known hostile species in the sector." She listed the coordinates of the enemy homeworld. "You have threatened my brother," she continued. "I am now threatening your entire civilization. The difference is that I am not bluffing. You have 30 seconds to stand down and provide medical assistance. This is not a negotiation." The observation room exploded with noise. Instructors were shouting over each other. This was not in the simulation parameters. The human was not supposed to fight back. She was supposed to break. Krell watched in silence. His claws were digging into the arms of his chair. On the bridge, Yuna did not wait for a response. She moved to Do-hyun's side and began preparing for surgery. She had no proper tools. No sterile environment. But she had a broken console panel with a sharp edge and steady hands that refused to shake. The enemy vessel did not fire. 20 seconds passed. 30. A minute. "Human vessel," the enemy finally said. "We are reconsidering our position. Medical assistance will be provided. Stand by." Yuna did not respond. She was too busy cutting into her brother's chest, searching for the shrapnel fragment that was killing him. She found it, removed it, pressed her hands against the wound and held it closed while blood soaked her uniform. The enemy's medical shuttle docked 7 minutes later. Alien doctors rushed aboard. They stabilized Do-hyun. They treated Yuna's hands, which were burned from holding the hot shrapnel. They did not speak to her. They did not meet her eyes. They were afraid of her. When the simulation ended, Yuna was still kneeling on the deck. Her hands were trembling now. The adrenaline was fading. The reality of what she had done was settling in. She had threatened genocide. She had gambled her brother's life on a bluff that might not have worked. She had done terrible things. And she had won. The fear chamber's door opened. Krell stood in the doorway, his massive form blocking the light. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "You cheated," Krell finally said. His voice was hollow. Yun looked up at him. Her face was exhausted. Her eyes were empty. "There is no cheating in survival," she said. "There is only living or dying. I chose to live. You threatened to destroy a civilization. I threatened to send coordinates. What they did with those coordinates would have been their choice." She stood slowly, her legs unsteady. "I did not start this scenario. I did not choose for my brother to be dying. But I will not lose him again. Not in a simulation. Not anywhere." She walked past him toward the medical bay. Real medical, not simulated. She needed to be sure that what she had done to her hands was not permanent. Behind her, Krell remained in the doorway. "The scenario was designed to be unwinnable," he said to her back. Yuna stopped. She did not turn around. "Nothing is unwinnable," she said. "Everything has a solution. You just have to be willing to pay the price." She paused. "Humans have always been willing to pay the price. That is why we are still here." She continued walking. Krell watched her go. Then he turned to face the observation room, where 17 instructors sat in stunned silence. "Archive the footage," he ordered. "Classification level, maximum. No one sees this without Commandant approval." "Why?" one instructor asked. Krell did not answer immediately. He was thinking about what he had just witnessed. A small, fragile creature from a violent little world had taken an impossible situation and bent it to her will through sheer force of refusal. She had not been the strongest, had not been the smartest, had simply been the one most willing to do whatever was necessary. "Because," he said finally, "if the galaxy sees what humans are truly capable of, some species will want to destroy them, and others will want to worship them. Either response would be catastrophic." He left the room without another word. The footage was buried that same day, but footage has a way of being found. 3 days after the final test, Instructor Krell submitted his resignation. The official report listed personal reasons and a desire to return to his homeworld. The unofficial truth was that he had spent 48 hours reviewing everything he thought he knew about training, warfare, and the psychology of fear. And he had concluded that he understood nothing. Before he left, he requested a final meeting with Admiral Sujin Cho, Earth's military representative to the Galactic Union. The Admiral was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had served in the Korean Navy for 30 years before being selected for diplomatic service. She had seen wars. She had lost people. And she had never once asked anyone for mercy. They met in a private chamber on Station Veritas 7. Krell did not sit. He stood at attention, as if he were the one being judged. "You tried to break her," Admiral Cho said. "It was not a question. I tried to understand her," Krell corrected. The fear chamber is a tool for understanding. It reveals what a being truly is beneath their training and their discipline. "And what did you learn?" Krell was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than the Admiral had ever heard it. "I learned that humans do not experience fear the way other species do. We feel fear, and we become paralyzed. We freeze or flee or submit. Fear is a signal that tells us to stop, to protect ourselves, to survive." He looked at his claws. But humans receive the same signal and they translate it. They turn it into something else. Into fuel, into focus, into anger. Admiral Cho nodded slowly. "We call it the fight response. It is very old. Millions of years of evolution on a planet that wanted us dead taught us that running was not always possible. Sometimes the only way to survive was to become more dangerous than whatever was trying to kill us. That is not normal, Krell said. No other species has this response so deeply embedded. Your ancestors were prey animals. You should have evolved to flee, not fight. We evolved to do both. That is why we survived. The Admiral leaned back in her chair. You spend weeks trying to teach Una Park fear, but she already understood fear better than you ever will. She understands it because she has lived with it her entire life. Every human does. We know that we are fragile. We know that we can die. We simply choose to act anyway. Krell shook his head. It is more than that. In the final test, she threatened genocide. She was willing to destroy an entire civilization to save one person. Yes, that is monstrous. Admiral Cho smiled. It was not a kind smile. That is love. Humans will burn down the universe for the people they care about. It is our greatest strength and our greatest weakness. We are capable of incredible cruelty when threatened, but we are also capable of incredible sacrifice. We will die for strangers. We will suffer for ideas. We will hold a cracked seal in a vacuum for 4 hours because someone else might need us to. She stood and walked to the window. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly. Humanity had only been out here for 40 years. In galactic terms, they were infants, but they had already begun to change things. You buried the footage, she said without turning around. It was necessary. I agree. 17 species have already requested copies. They want to study her. Some want to recruit her. Some want to dissect her. Admiral Cho turned back to face him. We cannot allow that. What Una represents is too important to be analyzed and categorized and filed away. What does she represent? Hope. The Admiral's voice softened. For 300 years, this academy has taught that fear is the ultimate weapon, that whoever controls fear controls the battlefield. But Una proved that there is something stronger than fear. There is will. There is refusal. There is the simple, stupid, beautiful human insistence that we will not give up no matter how much the universe wants us to. Krell considered this. He had trained thousands of warriors, had broken most of them, had believed that breaking was necessary, that only through confronting their deepest terrors could soldiers become truly strong. But Una Park had never broken, and she was stronger than anyone he had ever trained. What will happen to her? He asked. She will graduate with highest honors. She will be assigned to the Frontier Response Unit alongside Jiho Kang and Yoonji Lim. They will handle first contact situations with new species, situations where other approaches have failed. Admiral Cho smiled again, and this time it was genuine. Situations where someone needs to walk into the unknown and refuse to be afraid. Krell nodded slowly. It was appropriate. The human who could not be broken would face the galaxy's greatest challenges, and the galaxy would learn what Earth had always known. Humans did not break. They bent. They bled. They screamed. But they did not break. 6 months later, Una stood on the bridge of her own vessel, the Frontier Response Ship Persistence. Jiho was at the helm. Yoonji was at communications. Their crew was small but capable. They had been sent to the edge of known space to investigate reports of a new species. A species that called themselves the Mindhunters. The Mindhunters were psychic predators. They fed on fear. Every species they encountered had fallen to them within weeks. Their victims simply gave up, overwhelmed by terror so profound that their minds shattered. The first contact was not going well. The Mindhunter vessel was massive, black, and pulsing with strange energies. When their representative appeared on the view screen, Una felt something push against her mind, cold, hungry, searching for the fear that it expected to find. It did not find fear. It found Una Park, staring directly into the screen with eyes that had seen her parents die, had watched her brother drown, and held a vacuum seal with freezing hands for 4 hours. Eyes that had been tested in the fear chamber and had asked for more. "You are strange," the Mindhunter said. Its voice echoed with confusion. "We sense no fear in you, only hunger. What are you?" "I am human," Una said. "And I am here to talk." The negotiation lasted 3 days. The Mindhunters tried repeatedly to feed on the crew's fear. They found nothing they could consume. Jiho met their probes with quiet determination. Yoonji responded with focused anger, and Una simply smiled and continued talking as if nothing was happening. On the 4th day, the Mindhunters agreed to a peace treaty. They had never agreed to peace before. They had never met a species they could not terrify into submission. When asked why they had changed their approach, their ambassador said only this: "We tried to feed on their fear. There was nothing there, only teeth." The report was classified. The legend spread anyway. Word traveled through the galaxy like fire. The humans, the small, fragile creatures from the violent little world, they could not be broken. They could not be terrified. They turned fear into fuel and kept coming no matter what stood against them. Some species began to fear humanity. Others began to respect them. A few began to worship them. And on Earth, children grew up hearing stories of a woman named Una who had walked through fire and refused to burn, who had faced the darkness and made the darkness blink first, who had proven that the universe could try as hard as it wanted. Humans would survive anyway. 50 years later, Admiral Una Park retired with more honors than any human in history. She had ended 3 wars, negotiated peace with 12 species, and trained a generation of soldiers who believed that fear was just another tool in their arsenal. At her retirement ceremony, she was asked to give a speech. She stood at the podium 74 years old, her prosthetic fingers gleaming in the light, and looked out at the crowd of humans and aliens who had come to honor her. "I was asked once what I learned in the fear chamber," she said. "I was asked what made humans different, and I gave a complicated answer about evolution and psychology and the nature of fear." She paused. "But the real answer is simpler. The universe wants us dead. It has always wanted us dead. And we looked at the universe and said no. That is all. That is all. Just no." She smiled, and for a moment, she looked like the young woman who had walked out of the fear chamber and asked for more. "Keep saying no," she said. "Keep refusing. Keep surviving. That is what we do. That is who we are." She stepped down from the podium. The crowd rose to their feet, and somewhere in the galaxy, a species that had thought about attacking humanity changed their minds. Some lessons, after all, took a very long time to learn, but they were worth learning.